folks. This is our follow-up video for academic writing, specifically focusing on the evaluation paper, but many of these tips are good of all academic essays. You already went over the transitions in the previous video, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the other items. First of all, formatting needs to be uniform in all MLA documents. This is pretty critical because if your formatting isn't correct, it's like showing up to a job interview without the proper attire. The formatting tells your professor or teacher right away that you know what you're doing, that you understand the expectations of that setting, and it really undermines your credibility as a student if your formatting is off. Please refer to my other formatting videos that should help you make sure to format your essay either in Google Docs or Microsoft Word correctly in MLA format. As for your introduction to this paper and many others, the one thing that you don't want to do is have a since the dawn of time opening. Many of the Glass Castle essays, for instance, will oftentimes start with a really broad statement, such as, "Some parents are good and others are bad." That statement doesn't have any kind of connection to your actual point. It is okay to start right in on the issue at hand. Now, you want to give some context for sure, and you want to funnel, it's called a funnel opening, you want to funnel your audience down to the thesis statement, which in a typical academic essay is at the end of the introduction and sets up the rest of the essay. But you don't want to start so far away from the actual topic that your funnel is just way too wide. And the reason students do this is because they want to draw their reader in, and they're starting as broadly as possible in order to meet the audience where they are. However, you don't want to do that. You want to be addressing the assignment or addressing the context for the assignment right from the get-go. So instead of opening your paper with something like, "Some arguments are good and others are bad," which doesn't really say anything, you can just start with Christopher Blotman writing for the New York Times in 2017 and just jump right in with some context. You should also remember that introductory paragraphs don't use 3x. They have their own formatting rules. Typically, they start with some context, they work their way down to your point, and then end on a thesis. 3x is a big part of the body paragraphs of this essay. We've been working on that in a number of ways, but remember that one of your major points of assessment in your focus and purpose and development on the rubric is having 3x paragraphs for the body paragraph, starting with exposition, having examples in the middle that illustrate your point, and having explanation that clarifies what those examples mean. As far as academic point of view goes, the vast majority of academic papers are expected to be written in third person, including this first essay. That means that first person with words like I and my are avoided, along with second person, which includes words like you and us. The reason to avoid the first person is simple. It makes your claims sound less powerful and gives a sense you are unsure about what you're talking about. You can say, "I believe this paper is effective," or you could just say, "This paper is effective." Because your name is at the top of the paper, we know who is saying it. And so you don't need the word I, and especially "I believe," in front of your assertions because everything in the paper that's not in quotes is your assertions. And so you don't need to have any first person, and in fact you should not have I or my at all in the evaluation paper. Now eventually we will have some personal narrative, we will have some essays in a format that does lend itself to I and my, but for now you should be in third person. Second person, words like you, has another problem. Every pronoun has to refer to something. It's called an antecedent. Well, the word you refers to the reader, but that isn't what you mean when you write that. So for example, Susan had a special watch that she really liked. The word she refers back to Susan. That second person, though, referring to the audience is really problematic. In fact, I, as your instructor, am your main audience with your paper, but I have no place in that paper. Let's see some examples. When you smoke a cigarette, it damages your lungs. That actually means, if you write it in a paper to me, when Mr. Hamilton smokes a cigarette, it damages his lungs. Well, I don't smoke. That's kind of unfair for you to put on me. If you kill someone, you should receive the death penalty. Actually, that is, if Mr. Hamilton kills someone, he should receive the death penalty. Well, that's harsh to make a rule just for me. When you get pregnant, you should accept the consequences and avoid having an abortion. When Mr. Hamilton gets pregnant, wait a minute, did I have some kind of gender swap? I can't get pregnant. So that clearly doesn't work. Now, when it comes to quotations, the key rule is to not drop quotes naked and quivering in the sentence to die a lonely death. They need to be wrapped in the comfort of your own words. And this is pretty critical to sounding academic, to fitting the genre that you're trying to write in. You definitely want to make sure that you have control over those quotes. So this one from many years ago, this example, it says, for example, Blotman states that one thing we tried was giving out $200 in cash. Almost no men wasted it when speaking about one of the experiments he and his colleagues conducted. In another instance, Blotman writes, alcohol and tobacco spending fell or stayed the same when describing an experiment done in third world countries. All of that is super smooth. And in fact, if you read the paper out loud, you would have trouble, without seeing the quotation marks, knowing where her words end and the quotations begin, because it is so smooth. That is how you are supposed to integrate your quotes. Question marks, you definitely don't want to have any question marks in your essay. Usually rhetorical questions are much better served in speeches or in verbal situations where you have a captive audience. In papers, you need to make strong assertions, and wording it as a question not only makes it seem weaker, but it also implies that your audience could answer the question differently than you hope that they will. And so you want to avoid question marks in academic writing. Finally, in formal writing, you're supposed to avoid contractions. Now, if you're writing a short story or something with dialogue, contractions is totally fine. But you don't want to have it in formal writing. So don't becomes do not, I'll becomes I will, it's becomes it is. So that's a quick and brief review of academic writing. I hope that you feel like you got something out of it, and I'm excited to continue to help you on your journey to becoming a college-level writer. Thank you.